August 15th meeting of the TTSA Board of Directors to order. And let's ask Director Cox to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I feel honored.
Well, good. Let's see, do we need to do roll call? Or can we just note that Director Wilson is absent, the other four directors are here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on any items not on the agenda for up to 5 minutes. Is there any public comment?
Am I able to make a public comment?
You are?
Okay.
You're almost public.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes.
Mr. Jay gets to say what he really thinks about.
So in case you don't know who I am, and also more for the record, Jay Parker, Engineering Manager. So first, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all of the TTSA directors, management, and staff for a long and rewarding career at this agency. As of today, August 16th, I've completed 19 years of service, exactly 19 years ago. As a former consultant to the agency with C.H. Tom Hill, the first project I worked on was in 1994, now almost 30 years ago. That project was a study for the evaluation of chlorination facility improvements. Ironically, 3 decades later, one of the last projects I worked on here could have been titled with that same name, as we evaluated the facility improvements we were making and decided to fully implement sodium hypochlorite disinfection as an alternative. Ironically, back 30 years ago, I was pushing for UV because I had just come off of some UV research at school. And as a good consultant, I had to adhere to what the agency's preferences were, which was to stick with chlorine. So it's ironic that we opened up the conversation 30 years later. Back on that project in the mid-90s, I distinctly remember my boss at C.H. Tom Hill, Linda Moore, handing me the business card of Mr. Craig Woods, former GM of TTSA, saying something to the effect that I should hang on to Craig's card in case I ever wanted to get out of consulting. Little did I know that at that time, 10 years later after that, I'd be meeting with Craig in his office about onboarding with the agency. And that's a decision that I've never regretted. In fact, it's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. Over the course of the past 19 years, I've been able to round out the work experiences of my prior consulting career with a real-life, hands-on, practical knowledge of working at this incredible water reclamation facility. The knowledge I've gained has been stimulating, useful, and of immense value to me, and hopefully to the agency too over the years. TTSA has treated me well. I very much appreciate what the agency has provided to me and all of its other staff. As for you, the directors, I've found you supportive, engaged, interested, thoughtful, and forward-looking. Thank you for providing such great leadership. And having attended well over 200 TTSA board meetings, I can truly say that the agency has great leadership as it marches into the future. As for everyone else here, I've really enjoyed working with management and staff over the years throughout the entire organization, and I'm proud of our successes. I look back at what we've been able to accomplish with pride, and thank you for that. With respect to the engineering and safety departments, I've got to hand it to the excellent team I've had the good fortune of being able to work with. Mike, Aaron, Scott, and Trevor, thank you for all your contributions. Some of you aren't here. Hopefully they'll see this or hear it. Oh, they'll hear it from me personally. We've come a long way to raise the bar in our department and improve the quality and comprehensiveness of our work products and deliverables. Taking a bigger, wider view, what I will miss most after I've left is all the people here. Perhaps it's a trite statement, but it is true, even for a guy like me who spends so much time on solitary walks at lunch and at breaks, it's ironically the people that I'm going to really miss. I've enjoyed my time with all of you. So now it's time for me to move on and take advantage of still being young, relatively young, in my book, young, and able to pursue some of the dreams that pop up almost daily in my head. My wife and I do intend on staying local and continuing to live in this wonderful community as long as we can. I look forward to seeing you all sometime, someplace, somehow down the road. And again, thank you all for a long and rewarding career.
Jay, I remember your first day. Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Is there any additional public comment?
I have a public comment statement that someone asked me to read. It's actually from Director Wilson. Asked me to read this to you, Jay. Obviously, I'd like to thank you for your dedication, leadership, insight, knowledge, hard work, and commitment to TTSA over the past 19 years. In addition, I want to personally thank you for your openness, patience with all my questions, and thoughtfulness this past year. As a new board member, I worked to make myself as knowledgeable as possible about our facility, its operation, and history. You were the go-to guy for me, and I truly appreciate your sharing your knowledge with me. It made things much easier. However, I know you will thrive in your retirement. There are just so many trails out there to discover, so many amazing places to see. Enjoy them, my friend, and I hope to see you on one of those trails soon. Scott.
Thanks, John. Any additional public comment? All right. Move down to professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries. Vicki.
Good morning, President Wilkins and directors. As I do on a monthly basis, I would like to acknowledge staff for their professional achievements, awards, and anniversaries. And this month we only have, we have one anniversary, work anniversary, which is very significant, and that is 15 years for Kristen Davis. Thank you for being here, Kristen. I appreciate it. I don't know if anybody saw it, but as the meeting was starting, I'm like, she's not going to be here in time. I see her walking down the hall, and I'm like, and Jay, we didn't mention this on this item, but I would at least like to wish you well in your retirement. As you know, we've had many conversations, but yes, I really do hope I see you out on the trail. So, anyway, congratulations to both you, Jay and Kristen. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next is our consent agenda. Are there any members of the board that wish to pull any items from consent? Seeing none. And we don't have any public in the room unless, is there any staff who'd like to pull anything from consent?
No, there isn't.
Anyone like to make a motion? Consent calendar.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Director Cox, seconded by Director Trezin to approve the consent calendar. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
We have to have a roll call on that?
No. Motion approved.
Regular agenda. Item 1, discussion and possible approval of RFP for compensation and limited classification study.
And Vicki's going to take the lead on this one, the staff report.
So good morning again, President Wilkins and directors. Vicki Lubrano, Human Resources Administrator. In August of 2018, the board approved a classification and compensation study. The RFP was distributed and the agency received 3 proposals in September of 2018. Throughout the next year, discussions were shared with staff and the board related to that study. Results were implemented in January 2020 with updated job descriptions, salary schedule, and organizational chart. In October of 2022, during discussions related to possible changes to employee benefits, consideration was sought for a future class and comp study. In July of 2023, during an employee staff meeting related to employee benefits, consideration was again sought for a class and comp study. This was shared with the board during its July discussion related to employee benefits. Since employee benefits are a consideration in the total compensation package, the agency has prepared an RFP to receive bids for a future class and comp study, with the classification portion being limited to select classifications. Currently, we've selected 12 classifications. That could change, but that's the current number. It is desired that the study begin during the current fiscal year with a target implementation date of July of 2024, which is the beginning of the next fiscal year. During a recent all-staff meeting, the general manager offered to staff to have an observation group consisting of 4 employees of their choosing to follow the process through its entirety. Their choice of the 4 employees were 1 each from the maintenance, operations, administration, and engineering departments, with 3 being classic members and 1 being PEPRA member. And one of those classic members is subject to paying the employee share of the classic retirement. Also, one of those employees is a supervisor. Management and staff recommend the approval of the request for a proposal for the classification and compensation study with limited classification. So, any questions?
Questions or comments from the board?
None for me.
So the proposals, I remember the process we went through, year was 2020, 2019?
2019 it began, yeah. Or 2018, I'm sorry, August of 2018.
There was a pretty long process of picking the comparator agencies that we were going to team up with. The consultant had a list, staff had some other ones. We ended up doing a hybrid of the two. Are we going to go through that process again?
Yes,
Selecting
that is
one?
my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I guess, one of the big kind of pivot points in that whole process, I'm looking at the total compensation concept was, do we use PEPRA PEPRA benefits or classic benefits? And I don't know whether, is that something we'll cross down the road, or is there thought as to, how we would address that this time? Is that a TBD?
I would say it's TBD. It's something
Okay.
that's been, Vicki and I have been discussing as well as with staff, as far as what do we want to hang the comparable to. So I'd say TBD.
Okay. And then I guess it talks about, in the scope that the consultant will recommend the appropriate salary range based on their study, but I didn't see any reference, and typically, the board establishes a, placement within the comparator agencies we want our agency to be at, but I didn't see that step in there, but I guess that process would still be, I think we picked 75th percentile in the last comp study. I don't know whether that was codified as like for everything, or will that come back to us, or is that assumed in the scope, or will there'll be a step in the process where once again, I think the board will be queried in what, where we want to be percentile wise?
Yeah, I think one assumption was that was the direction we were going. I think we make that part of the step as we bring back the comparables, and then have board action taken to set the comparable agencies as well as the benchmark.
And that is how it took place last time.
Right. And I don't know whether, it'd be good to maybe, it's tricky to do that after the fact when you know what percentile, how that influences the end number, whereas that should be a policy decision the board makes perhaps up front, and then the numbers fall where they are based on that.
I would actually, and we're kind of getting ahead into the work scope of the future consultant, this being the RFP to solicit consultant services, but I would actually see value in knowing what both the 50th percentile would result in and the 75th, and have the consultant run both sets of numbers so we can understand what that spread is. I don't know know if it's a 5% spread or a 20% spread. Because the other thing that happens with, especially when we're doing, when our comparables are, have a lot of our local agencies, the speed at which each agency does these classic comp studies can really cause these things to ratchet up or to stagnate. You know, if everyone's marking off of each other and marking the 75th percentile, it's like, okay, we marked everyone else and we're saying we're going to be higher than everyone else, then the other agencies kind of remark within 2 years, and then they leapfrog us, and at some point it kind of runs away from you. So my personal opinion is that knowing what the 50th percentile is, kind of what the average would be versus the 75th would be good information. And then we as a board can decide when the time comes, this is down the road, you know, where we want to set our, what we think is appropriate. So,
Yeah, I think it's good. I think there's, you know, I think that Pepper Classic dichotomy is a challenging one, and I'm glad we're doing this to revisit that. And then, you know, with our discussion about health benefits and the platinum and the gold, and trying to find, you know, a good balance, best benefits for the agency, and not. I think it's good that we're embarking on this effort. So, yeah, I think maybe I was getting a little ahead of myself, but I'm glad that we're soliciting proposals, and you'll come back to the board process-wise with a recommendation.
Yeah, so today's approval is give us the authority to fly the RFP.
Okay.
Then we'll come back for approval to enter into the contract with them, and then we can codify having them do the scope of work at the 50 and 75 if that's still the direction we want to go, and then the steps to set the comparables.
yeah. Sounds good. Question, Vicki, you mentioned, and I think it's a good idea, basically a working group of staff from each of the 4 bargaining units. You said 3 of the folks would be likely to be classic employees, 1 Pepro. What's our current percentage, if you will, of classic versus Pepro at TTSA?
I wish I would have looked right before I came in here, but I do know that Pepra has outnumbered Classic at this point.
Right.
Just barely. So I'm going to guess 55-45, something like that. We do have 3 employees that are Classic members paying their own employee portion of Classic retirement. And yeah, the group will be an observation group only. And yes, it is. It just they got to choose however they wanted to set it up, but they chose 1 person basically from each department.
Okay.
And it was suggested, you know, maybe consider Classic and Pepra, getting a good mix on there. There is 1 employee that is also on Group A of the salary schedule, meaning someone that's redlined on the salary schedule from the last study.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's a good mix of individuals.
So I think the other thing we did last time around is I think we had a board subcommittee, I think it was Blake and I, that kind of met a couple of times in addition to the board meetings to meet with the consultant. I don't know if you guys want to do that again. What we could do is when we hire the consultant at the September board meeting or October board meeting, when we agendize that, we include potentially assigning a board subcommittee.
Okay.
It could be the finance committee. I don't know. But so if we could at least have that conversation, we want to do a subcommittee to kind of focus on this.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. And we can be thinking between now and then about if any of us are interested in serving on it, raise our hands then and sort it out at that meeting.
Okay.
Okay. So, do you need formal action to release the RFP, or do you just want this conversation in general direction?
I think we just need general direction. I don't think, from a legal standpoint, we need action to do an RFP. Obviously, we do direction we've got.
Okay. Any other comments before we move on? Okay. All right, next is approval to enter into an agreement with Carollo Engineers to conduct a land use risk analysis study.
So I'll take this one today. So as we've discussed at the prior board meetings, we reached out to Carollo and got a scope of work with their consultants to conduct the risk assessment that we've been discussing. The proposal is part of the packet. They came in at $61,000 for the scope of work. They have a couple of sub-consultants that they're working with. In addition, I was discussing with agency counsel this morning. As we've discussed prior, we were working on title searches as well via a title company, and there's been some challenges getting title companies to respond. We may want to consider adding this into the scope. It is an additional line item that they included in their proposal to provide title search and or appraisals, which I think appraisals would be down the road a bit. But if the board was interested in allowing us to utilize Carollo and their sub-consultants to do the title searches, it gets us into a one-stop shop with the work that we're going to do.
Do they have a title company that will actually do the work?
They have a sub-consultant, Bender Rosenthal Inc., which is a well-known consultant. I've used them in the past. They do a ton of public agency real property work.
Right.
And frankly, they should have a much better relationship with the title company than we currently have in the delayed work. So yes, I think they should be able to get the work done quickly.
Didn't we already approve acquisition of, engaging somebody to do the preliminary title search?
Yeah, board gave me an authorization to spend up to $20,000 for title searches, and I've been working with Andrew, and he was taking the lead trying to lock down a title company, but as mentioned, there have been challenges getting anyone to express interest in doing it.
Okay.
So we would dissolve that and move it into this scope of work and just let Carollo do it themselves.
In that line item, you mentioned title search and then appraisals. Appraisals is a whole different scope of work than
Exactly.
title search. So are we authorizing both of those? Or
I would suggest we just approve title search and we do appraisals as we move this forward. That may not be worthy of spending the money on it at this point.
I agree.
When you say title search, is that going to be the 61 or is that going to be the 20 that we had already talked about? Or are we talking about a combination of both?
Carollo's base price was $61,000. I'll need to discuss with them. They gave us an additional line item for $17,000 to do title and appraisal. So I'll need to break that out and see how much is just title. So I would ask that we give me some leeway on dollar amount so we can include it in. It wouldn't be the total to 71. It's going to be 61 plus, hopefully around 20,000 more. So.
Okay.
You guys have, I don't know, you've created this acronym LURIS, the Land Use Risk Analysis Study. Carollo uses it also. Is this a common enough kind of type of report that there is such a thing as a LURIS, or did we create that ourselves?
I think Jay actually coined the.
It was just it was land use risk assessment, and I was like, Lura, the AdWords study.
Okay.
I just coined it.
So this is a kind of unique project that's not like consultants do LURIS, and they would all know what a LURIS is. This is specific to our agencies.
It may be that this kind of effort is done for other agencies in a similar package, but they wouldn't know it by that term. We just coined that term convenience.
And I believe in discussions you had with Carollo, that was something they embarked on before.
Yes.
With these consultants that they brought on board for this one. So
yeah, it wasn't like this was some strange animal that they'd never seen or heard about. But that term, LURIS, if you threw that around to some of your colleagues, they'd probably just stare blankly.
Okay, I was curious.
So what we're saying is that Carollo's done a risk assessment for somebody else in the past.
Carollo has engaged 2 sub-consultants. One is Bender Rosenthal, and the other is Ascent Environmental. And both of those have done these. Both of the sub-consultants have done this kind of work before. Carollo hasn't directly done the work, but they're looking at this project from a bigger view of master planning. Carollo is very engaged in terms of what our needs are in the future, for process, and so that's why they're involved. But yeah, Carollo, I don't think has any direct experience with their staff doing it, but their subs do.
They're a contractor, they're our main contractor, and they're subbing out this risk analysis to this other group.
They're subbing out big pieces of it. Like Carollo would be the one, the point person, so to speak, and coordinate efforts, coordinate with the sub. They're the ones that would communicate with the sub-consultant, and then make sure our interests are kept in mind in terms of our processes, how much buffer space we may want, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense?
So, Carollo's qualifications, I think we know pretty well. We've hired them for that gigantic master plan. I think they've done some other stuff with us. Looking at the last page, the scope, the pricing, they really are, the majority of the work is being done, it looks like, by Ascent. And yet there was nothing in the scope project about their statement of qualifications. It's an important piece of study we're doing. There's a lot of interested parties in the community that are going to be tracking this. We're being asked to approve this work, but Ascent's doing the work, and there was nothing on Ascent other than they've got experience. Has staff actually seen some of Ascent's, staffing and previous work they've done, and
Yes.
We've done the due diligence to make sure that they're really the right firm to be doing this important study that, again, a lot of folks are not just internally but externally are going to be looking at.
So we have not had direct contracts with Ascent, but we've seen other projects in the region where we've been involved in providing input, where Ascent Environmental has provided the environmental services for those projects for other organizations. So they're definitely a recognized name up here for environmental. As to their resume or list of projects where they might have done something similar to this exact type of project, I wouldn't be able to vouch for that. I just know that they're a recognized name.
Other questions or comments?
Well, I have a comment about the proposal. Throughout, they talk about sale of land versus lease. And coming back from Alpine, feedback I'm getting is not to sell, lease. You retain control. You sell the land, whatever deed restrictions you put on it are breakable. You don't know what's going to happen with the land down the road. And the other part of it is that this is not a one-time money in our pocket type thing. It's the land, and this whole operation is a forever operation. So by selling the land, you do a favor for us right now, but by leasing it, everybody forever gets the benefit. And that's the feedback I got from my board and from a lot of locals in Alpine.
Are you thinking for the
write-up should write, instead of sale/lease, something like that. or the whole proposal.
Use.
The word use.
With the word use. I hear what you're saying, Dave.
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation that we gotta have.
This whole issue is going to start consuming a lot of our time. And it's already consuming quite a bit of time at the Olympic Valley Public Service District because we've been discussing this, not in detail, but in general concept. And I'm going to chime in with what David had to say, and that is right now, in its infancy stages of this proposal, and not so much this proposal we're talking about, I'm talking about the sale of our land. The board at the Olympic Valley Public Service District's not too keen on it. And I think that, for us to spend $75,000, maybe $75,000 plus on a situation that maybe all of the member districts are not going to be in favor of in the end, is it money well spent? Because we're looking at 70,000 plus, Richard?
I would say somewhere between 61 to 70.
Yeah. That's the way we're discussing it right now. But I really, I think this study is needed. However, I think that we're putting the horse in front of the carriage right now because I'm not sure that we're going to get buy-in from all the member districts to be able to participate in the sale of our excess land.
Yeah, we may not.
We may not.
Right.
And are we willing to take this kind of a risk? I mean, $61,000 in the scope of things at this stage of the game, to me, is a significant amount of money. And I'll leave it at that.
Didn't we agree we want to know what our risk assessment is at any rate? And I see value in that.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Jay, I've got a question since we've got you here for this one last meeting. I know there have been, well, I shouldn't say that, I haven't seen the studies. My understanding is that there have been studies that have been done in the past as it relates to plant safety and the safety of the general public in the vicinity of the plant and beyond. Can you, am I just imagining that, or I know you have told me before that you've seen information that kind of provides, about, gee, if there was a massive chlorine release,
So
what might happen.
let me stop you there because
Yeah.
it's confidential. It's considered confidential information not for public dispensing.
Mhm. But there has been work done by TTSA in the past that has looked at our plant operations, our chemicals,
Yes.
and that has evaluated different scenarios that could occur and what the net result would be to the general public under certain circumstances, correct?
Yeah, I mean, agencies such as us are required to do that. And so, yeah, there's work that's happened. I just can't discuss it.
So is that work that we can discuss in closed session?
I'll leave that to legal counsel.
There's some complications there. There are some exceptions that allow you to discuss that in closed session. Not today, but we could do that as appropriate, yes.
So and the reason I'm getting into this is it's like there's some documents out there that are, I guess, sensitive for one reason or another. It seems like it would be useful for us as the board to understand what those documents are to the extent that the law allows us to understand what they say, and then how this work we're talking about either fits into that or expands on it, I think is important. So
If they're not public documents, they can't be shown to Corolla, I guess.
I believe not.
Yeah.
We may be able to arrange it so that there would be some confidentiality agreements and things. We could take a look at that, but it really depends on what the plan was prepared under and what state or federal laws are involved. So we'd have to take a look at it.
So I also suspect that was probably based on our prior disinfection process. Using chlorine was one of the things that was looked at, and then there was probably other chemicals we used that were part of that evaluation as well. With what we're doing.
I'm not sure how much information is. I'm going to say no comment.
So what I'm getting at is I think there's some information that's been put together about our current or our most recent, up to 4 or 5 months ago, treatment processes and what could go wrong with those and how that could affect the community around us. Now what we're doing is an evaluation that looks at our current treatment process, and it would be interesting, at least for me, to understand the difference between the two at the end of the day. And I just want to get, if we're going to spend the money to get this information, I want to get as much out of it as possible. And I understand there could be some sensitivity with some of the information that we currently have, but I think for us as the board to have a full picture of our operation and what it used to be and what it is going forward is useful.
So
I know safety is a high level of concern to us, right?
So we're required by law to keep those studies updated first, and the extent of the studies has to do with what our current operations are. I want to just say that I'm not walking away being the only person with that knowledge. There's actually somebody on staff that is staying and is even more knowledgeable on this. So no matter how this shakes out, I think the agency would have that person as turn to.
But I think, and we're kind of talking in code here, I think it would be useful to maybe on a future board meeting for us to be apprised as to what these document requirements are, what the sensitivity is around them, so we know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this whole thing that it's like, oh, we can't tell you as the board what's going on, right, with our plant and with some of these safety things
I think
we as the board are concerned about, and that doesn't feel right.
In open session, I think in open session is the
Understood.
limitation that we're dealing with. Yes.
All right, where do we go from here, Mr. President? Are we going
Thanks.
to ratify this proposal from Carrillo, or are we going to postpone it until we get more information?
I'm supportive of moving forward with this. I just, because my sense is that this is going to give us information that's kind of above and beyond what we already have in some of these other studies. And, this is something we've talked about at the last couple of meetings. I know Dave was skeptical about spending the money on it. I think he made that comment previously. But
Yeah, I couldn't vote for this unless they do something like sales/lease and all this dialogue.
Yeah. We can certainly work that with
Yeah.
Corolla as we do that.
Because I think there'll be more to it if we were considering a lease as well as a sale. That's a different animal, and that might change some of their.
And that's another kind of philosophical conversation for us as the board to have if we get to that point. Yeah. So, from my perspective, I think we should move forward and include the additional work scope to get the title reports if Vendor Rosenthal thinks they can get them when our local title companies are being non-responsive. So that's my thought on it.
think the information is something that we really should have, even if we decide we're not going to participate in the sale.
Right.
So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agreement with Carrillo Engineers Incorporated to conduct the land use risk analysis study.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Director Cox.
Does that
second by
also
Director-
include what I was talking about?
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
Okay. Is there there's no public comment on this. We don't have any Zoom participation. Any final comments from the board? All right. We've got a motion to move forward with the study, including the title reports, and clarify that it should be sale or lease. And I guess with that, those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, item 3, discussion and review of agency purchasing policy resolution.
So in 2015, the agency adopted an ordinance governing its purchasing procedures in light of current events, costs, and the challenges that are faced with acquiring goods. Almost a year ago, I had approached the Finance Committee as a first step at drafting a new policy for purchasing and procurement. They were open to us moving forward with that, so we've drafted the policy that's included in the packet. We ran it by the Finance Committee at the last Finance Committee meeting and received positive feedback. So wanted to bring it for a discussion item because the next agenda item is to repeal the ordinance. So when they did that policy, they did it as an ordinance. In working with Andrew, it would be more appropriate for it to be a resolution. So to move anything forward, we have to repeal the original ordinance at this board meeting, and then we would enact the new resolution at the next scheduled board meeting. So that's kind of the background on it. Most of the parameters stayed the same, with the exceptions of dollar amounts and some additions to purchasing options, such as a piggyback, which is where you can utilize another government agency that's advertised and gone through the competitive process, where the vendor will hold pricing, and it's been done within the last year. Items such as that, and then we're also including a purchasing card policy within the purchasing policy, outlining approved purchases, unapproved purchases, and the dollar amounts would line up with the overall dollar amounts. So it is increasing. Normally, we have to come back to the board for anything in over $15,000. I'm asking to raise that to $25,000. Typically, we have to competitively bid anything over $5,000, which is very constraining in this day and age. You don't get much for $5,000 anymore. So we're increasing that dollar limit as well. I do want to note this does not change anything when it comes to public contracting. That $5,000 limit is set within the state's California contracting code, and we may look at the future. There are some options there, but that's not part of this policy. So, any questions on it?
You answered.
Richard, would it be okay if I clarify one thing?
Sure.
As part of the staff. The action today would just be for discussion only. The reason for that is, as part of repealing the ordinance, you'd need to have the introduction, which is your next item, as well as the actual approval, which would come forward at a future meeting, planned for your next meeting. One of the reasons we're doing this is because that two-step process for an ordinance is onerous. When you need to update this policy, going through the two-step process really doesn't make a ton of sense. Ordinances make good sense for public-facing directives to the public, not so much for internal policies like this one, where a resolution is more appropriate. And I think getting on track makes a ton of sense. But that's not an action necessarily for today. Today is discuss, give good feedback to staff on whether you like what you see, and we'll get it ready for actual approval next time, at the same time as you be proposed to repeal the actual ordinance.
Okay. So it sounds like this was reviewed with the finance committee.
Yeah, Scott and I looked at it.
Did you have any additional comments you want to offer, Blake, or?
No, I mean, we went through it in relative detail, and there's a lot of elements to the purchases that the organization makes, and it sounded like this was going to streamline it without really removing the checks and balances we wanted as board members for the big ticket items. And so, Scott and I were both in favor of recommending bringing this to the whole board for approval.
Okay. Questions or comments? Dave or
Nope.
The one question I've got is: are we going far enough in terms of providing additional latitude? $15,000 doesn't buy much these days either.
Well, 25,000 is what he's asking for the increase, correct?
Yeah. So
Right.
we're at 15. We would go to 25. That's in line with the change order authority that the general manager has.
Okay.
I think looking at, I've worked with all the other managers on it. What's the constraints, what your challenges have been? I think 25 is a good number for now.
Okay.
Depending on where the economy goes, we could be back looking for more.
Yeah. I wouldn't have balked if we were trying to push the numbers even higher that are available at the staff authority. But if the staff and the board is comfortable with where we're at, then I'm good with it.
Fine.
Okay.
I'm good.
I'll move. Or actually, it's not an
Yeah,
action.
it's just a
So we're
discussion
just
item.
saying, bring it. Let's waive the other one and bring this
Yeah.
one back at a future board
So,
meeting.
if you guys are good with it as drafted, then that's what we'll bring back for approval at the future meeting. Yeah, it falls over the. Go higher.
Saw some viewers perk up with the possibility of the numbers being a bit higher. So, okay, item 4, waive first reading and introduce ordinance 3-2023, repealing ordinance 3-2015.
Yeah,
So
so
basically setting us on the path that we just talked about.
that's correct.
Is there any further discussion on this?
Nope.
Anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Director Cox, second by Director Smeltzer. No, is there any further discussion? No public comment? Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, item 5, waive first reading and introduce ordinance 4-2023 prohibiting after-hours use of agency property.
So this is following up after we had our trespassing incident and working with legal to move forward with signage and authority to enforce the signage that we post. So I'm working with council. We have an ordinance that puts some teeth to the trespassing, camping issues so that if we need to have Truckee police enforce it, they have an ordinance they can reference. That's what's before you today. Once we get the ordinance approved, then we can then install the signage and try and rein in some of our overnight guests.
Okay.
This is a direct reflection of our overnight intoxicated female that caused so much havoc.
That is correct.
Thank you for following up on this, Richard. This, to me, was a very important issue that I was afraid that was going to kind of fall through the cracks. And I'm glad to see that we're going to get some enforcement from our local agency to help us out with this, because this is very, very important for me as a director. I think everybody should share the same concern. We cannot afford to have vandalism, especially to the point where it could have effect on our operation. And putting signs out is a very good first step. I would put razor wire on the top layer of that 6-foot fence that was scaled by a drunken individual. Could we do more to help with the security here at the agency? I'd leave that up to you, Richard, as general manager, but we got an important operation here, and we cannot afford to have things like this go on.
You're talking about the lady that started the fire last year?
Yes.
And then came over to the plant and
Well, she
denied it.
just, she came in and harassed the employees, and
Yeah.
then she breached our security by climbing over the fence. And I wouldn't want to try and climb over the fence myself sober. But obviously, this individual figured out a way to do it without bodily harm. But like I say, that barbed wire at the top of that 6-foot fence was not a deterrent.
And not in her case. If anyone has any horsepower with the post office, that would be helpful, because we're having challenges getting the post office in the front gate. But as far as additional security measures, we do have some budgeted line items for additional security. Paul's currently working with a vendor to update the front card reader for the gate, and as we, I'm sure as we put up signage around the perimeter, we may identify areas that we need to do more fencing or gates, which we can cover under that budget. But I think the ordinance is a really good start to give us what we need to legally enforce the individuals that are camping overnight. We've tried to draft it to where it still allows for the day use for the people who are enjoying walking their dogs and enjoying the outside area. We just put some parameters for hours, so we have some teeth if there become a problem that we can call. And now Truckee PD has something to reference to say, no, you can't do this.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
When we say signage, last year, our property turned out to be a drag strip in a place to test the horsepower of their motorcycles and whatever. I haven't seen that kind of activity this year, at least the black rubber marks and all this stuff that we saw last year. Where are those signs going to be located? Are they going to be out there at the entrance of our property by TSD, or where are we talking?
Yeah, Andrew and his group provided us guidance on how many signs, spacing of signs. To answer the question, yes, it would be all the way out at the entrance of our property, and then they have to be so many feet from every road or trail. So there's going to be a number of signs that have to go up to cover everything.
Okay.
We had talked about this before. The group was bicycling out here and had no idea what this is or anything else, and that's what got started with the idea of the signs. Local people who bicycling would be in a big group, and not a one of them knew what the heck any of this is. And so the signs are a great idea.
Process-wise, this is agendized as a waive the first reading, so this also basically, it'll come back again, and then once we actually approve the ordinance next month, then you can start taking action on it. And maybe next month you could provide us with sort of the signage plan, examples of what the signs would look like and sort of where they would be, would be good to look at. I imagine, even though in reading this, it doesn't call it out specifically, but I imagine the Legacy Trail, which runs across our property, that's within an easement to the town, and that would perhaps trump this, because I'm sure that there's, with e-bikes and headlights and stuff, that there's probably a decent amount of after-hour use of the Legacy Trail that, nobody's going to go out there, I don't think you're going to task your staff or the police to arrest folks or, cite them for using the Legacy Trail. It's really to prevent nuisances.
Yeah, it's really, the hours is really to prevent the campers that we're getting up in, I'll say up in this area.
Right.
As far as the fence line, that would just be the basic no trespassing sign.
Right.
The sign that prohibits camping and the hours of use would be more along Jorger.
So there's not going to be an attempt to restrict use of the Legacy Trail?
Not at all.
Okay. All right, because I think that would be
Not at all.
problematic. Okay.
We call that the Wilkins Trail. The Dan
Nice.
Wilkins Memorial Trail.
No, we don't call it that.
Yes, we did. Yeah, I sat through 2 years of your lobbying on this
And just for
trail.
the-
It's your trail, Dan. It's your trail.
For the sign samples, we'll definitely bring that back. Our initial thought was kind of like Forest Service signs, the brown, the kind of fit in with the natural landscape.
And you say you've worked with, I guess it would be Truckee PD, so that, you know, if there was somebody, once this goes up, and we noticed it and called for assistance, they would have the authority to basically evict the folks from the property.
Correct. Yeah, I've been in touch with the lieutenant over there, and this was the first step. Get signage. Once we have the signage, then we have the ability to enforce.
Okay.
So.
Thanks.
Okay.
And the only name on the trail is actually of the board members on TPSA. There's a plaque out there with your name on it, Bill.
What is it?
My name's not on there.
So we're gonna blame you, huh?
There's no intent to include the legacy trail under this, but I think that would be a reasonable addition because there are some exceptions under the definition of agency property. I think adding the legacy trail is one of the places where this does not apply. It would be a reasonable add, and it wouldn't change anything. Good clarification.
I'm trying to think if there could be nuisance use of the legacy trail at night.
Sure.
You know, I don't know. I don't want to create. You know, if we do it, then are we restricting our ability to get rid of the nuisance use? But if we don't call it out, and then we evict folks there, if they say, "Hey, you've been letting people ride there. Why are we getting kicked off?" You know, would that create a problem? I don't know. It just
By nuisance use, are you talking about, you know, graffiti, injurious use, drug use, that sort of thing? Because all
Yeah,
of those
I know,
could
right.
already be prohibited,
Okay.
regardless of signage. No
Okay.
issue there trespassing somebody.
okay. So yeah, if you think it's appropriate, given the concerns I raised, modifying this slightly.
Okay.
Fine with that.
So would the appropriate action be to introduce ordinance 4-2023 with that amendment?
Correct.
Okay. Is there further discussion on this? Would anyone like to make a motion? I think the motion that if we wanted to be clear that the legacy, that this didn't apply to the legacy trail, we would make a motion to introduce ordinance 4-2023 and adding, you know, the legacy trail as
An exception to the agency property
as an
coverage.
exception to the ordinance. Right?
Yes.
Anyone want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Dave. Motion by Director Smeltzer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Trezin. There's no further discussion. Those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, sorry. Okay. Any opposed? None opposed. Next is Resolution 12-2023 regarding investment of monies in the local agency investment fund. Kristen.
Good morning. So this resolution, we're getting the updated signatures for LEAF, for transfers ins and outs of LEAF, because LEAF is the only one that requires us to have a resolution. So the resolution is just to get the updated signatures, removing Jay, adding Paul, and then the rest of the signatures are the same.
Okay.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by, motion by Blake, second by Dave, to approve Resolution 12-2023. There's no further discussion. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. Next is approval of agency reserve fund policy.
Good morning again. So we are bringing before you a fully revamped agency fund policy for our finance and operating reserve funds. The purpose is set forth various funds to describe each fund's purpose, how they may be used, target balance, and authority of process to withdraw. That is the same for that's the same purpose for the original policy. for this policy, some of the big changes are we are designating the funds to be unrestricted and restricted, making that designation. And then we are updating to more of a current practice of target fund balances or recommended minimum target fund balances. So the first big change is, well, it's not a huge change, but one of the first changes is in the operating fund. The target balance for that one, instead of being 60%, is 50%, which is the first 6 months of the year, with a minimum being 90 days, but the target is 180 days. Questions on that one?
So, just a general question. We had, I thought we had set this policy similar to this previously. No?
We review it every year. The reserve fund policy, it's just a yearly review, and in the past, since in the time that I've been here, which is just a little over 2 years, we haven't made any changes, just reviewed it to.
So this is reviewing the policy we adopted a few years ago?
Well, no, we're making changes this time.
And recommending?
Yes, recommending changes. We have Ken Deeker from Del Rio. He did some research for us on the reserve fund policies, just to kind of see what the norm is out there, and realign us with the general norm out there in industry standards. So the buying power and the intent of the funds and where the revenues are coming from for each fund has not changed. Really just focusing on the target balances and getting them more current. And establishing for the operating fund, we're establishing a minimum of 90 days, but the target is 180 days.
As compared to?
The target of 60% of the annual budget. So instead of having 60% of the annual budget, the target is 90 minimum, 180 days is the target. Because we don't get our tier payment until January of every year. So this one has only a minor change. Instead of 60% is 50%.
So I think what would be helpful to me is, as we're talking through this, is to understand where we're making modifications from our previously approved reserve balance philosophy.
Mm-hmm. And the modifications are going to be in the target balances for each fund. And the other big modification was that we're identifying which ones are unrestricted versus which ones are restricted. The red line, since we kind of redesigned the whole presentation, the whole prior one would be redlined because we moved things around. So, I mean, I can bring a redline copy or send a redline copy.
At least highlight.
It's a rewrite. It's a complete rewrite.
Because the meat on the bone is those percentages that we use, and these reserve policies are key in both our budgeting process as well as in rate setting.
Yes.
Because we're setting rates to achieve targets. And so, these are important numbers.
We spent a fair amount of time on these when we adopted them. So I just want to understand where staff is recommending changes and the rationale for it, for that to be obvious, and if this wasn't completely obvious.
Okay. Well, I can walk through them, and then I can bring it back with highlighted changes in the summary if you'd like.
Why don't we walk through them, and maybe I'm the only one who's sensitive to this, and if that's the case, then so be it. But I think, why don't you continue, but as part of your presentation, you can point out what it is that's changing.
Sure.
What's recommended to be changed.
Sure.
Okay.
So on the first one, the operating funds on page 2, it's Fund 10, the general fund. The source and the purpose of the fund has not changed. The recommendation is the target reserve is to have 180 days or more of cash on hand, or 50% of current year budgeted operating expense less the depreciation and capital outlay. The minimum fund level for this reserve shall be 90 days of cash on hand or 25% of current year budgeted operating expenses.
So
So
what's
that's
that
the
changing
big,
from?
I'm sorry.
What's that changing from?
It used to be 60% of the annual budgeted expenses plus the annual budgeted payments towards UAL and debt financing.
And Crystal, I think on this one, I'm okay with the 50%. I think, though, what we're talking about is wanting to, that the district shall start each fiscal year with that amount.
Yes.
Because, like you said, we go between July and January without any receipt, effectively, of property tax or the majority of our user fees, and so we're going to consume a lot of
Right.
expenses before we get our first payment from the county for those. And so, if we have a target, the target is really to start the year, because even if we start the year at that point, we fall below that between July and December. We probably even fall below the minimum level that we've set here. And so, what would this mean to us if we set it at 50 and by November we're now below 25%? Are we going to start doing fund transfers to account for this? Or I think what we're trying to say is that the for our reserve policy, we want to start each fiscal year with 50% of the operating budget.
Correct. That's the target
Not
for
to-
sure.
And if we did 50%, won't we fall below probably 25% before we get to January? If we're only 50%, we're going through potentially half the year.
Well, we've got, this gives us a little bit of flexibility because we don't pay the debt payment until December, January, the interest part, and then the final debt payment is at the end of the year. So I know that we account for that as part of the 60% on the original policy. But in general, it's mostly just the operating expenses for the first 6 months. We don't have the big payments until later in the year.
So you've done a cash flow analysis, so I just want to adopt a policy that we're going to immediately start violating.
Well, and the minimum is the 25%. So what we would have to do at that, if we get to that minimum and we don't have the 90-day cash flow, we would have to transfer funds no matter what from the Fund 6. And again, in only the 2 years that I've been here, we have never run into that.
And then, okay.
In the original policy, we don't establish a minimum for the operating
Right,
budget.
I'm not used to a minimum statement in there. I've seen our past practice just established that we'll start each fiscal year with a certain amount, and that just basically gets us through the year. And the purpose of the minimum is to
Just to
don't wanna
have
create
it,
extra
just to
work
have
in
a
county that
minimum.
have to start doing interfund transfers.
We have to watch that all the time anyways, because, we have to make sure we're not expending more than we have. So that's a monthly process for us when we look at our cash. This would give flexibility if we go below the 25% where we can transfer the money if we need to, versus 60%.
Well, we'll see how that, if we go with that. I also had a question on the kind of parenthetical statement in the parentheses. 50% of the current year budgeted operating expenses, less depreciation and capital outlay.
We don't have any capital outlay in Fund 10,
Or
but
depreciation isn't part of budgeted operating expenses, so I don't know why those items are in there. It sounds like we're going to say 50% of our current year. On the books, there's a level of depreciation that's pretty huge, and so are we going to reduce that current operating expenses by the amount of projected depreciation we're gonna have, and then also reduce it by our capital outlays.
Well, and for Fund 10, it's not, depreciation and capital outlays are not applicable.
That's what I'm thinking,
because
so I'm not
it's
sure why
the-
we would reduce, what that seems to say to me is we're gonna do 50% of our current year operating budget, so let's say that's $10 million, less depreciation and capital outlays, so then we're gonna reduce that 10 million by depreciation and our projected capital, which
Right. And I
doesn't
believe
seem
this,
to make sense to me.
I believe this was some standard language that Ken had found, and we don't have depreciation and capital outlay in Fund 10 at this moment in time. I don't know if we ever have. I don't think that we have, and I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm okay if we remove that. That's not.
I would strike those, they
critical.
seem like they don't make sense to me, and you wouldn't want to, less sounds like you would subtract those items from the operating budget, and we don't want to do that.
So the big change. So the change is then 50% target balance with 25% being the minimum between the prior policy and current policy. That's the big change for the operating fund,
Previously it was 60%.
and no minimum.
So we're reducing it slightly.
I'm sorry.
We're reducing the target
Yes,
reserve amount
we
by
are.
10%.
We are. That is correct.
Okay, that's the recommendation. Okay, so why don't we move down to the next one?
Well, sorry, Dan, just,
Okay.
if we're going to try and take action on this, I think that we still need to say the target for this reserve that has 180 days or more cash in hand, I think we need to say at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the minimum of 25%, if you feel like that's good to have in there, I think we may end up, if we really follow that strictly, doing interfund transfers that aren't really necessary, and we may end up striking that in a future revision of this.
And then you wanted to eliminate the reference to depreciation and capital outlay.
Yeah.
And I am not tied to the minimum. It's just a recommendation.
Okay.
I'm not tied to that having to be in the policy. So if there's a preference of not having that in the policy, I'm good. I'm okay with taking it out.
I mean, my thought is if our target is 50% of our operating budget, that's our target. And we should just go with that. The minimum reserve amounts, I think when it comes to capital reserves, there's maybe some different justification for having those, but for an operating reserve, we should just be setting what our target is and then try to budget to it.
Right. And by saying just set the target to start the year with 50%, that gives staff clear direction when creating the budget, how much money they need in there, and the remainder can be transferred to other funds, and, that'd be good. Yes, so I would perhaps strike the minimum amount.
Okay.
as well.
So just leave it at the beginning of the fiscal year. The target for this reserve is to have 180 days or more of cash on hand, or 50% of current year budgeted operating expenses, period.
Right.
Strike the rest.
Are you guys okay with that?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me move down to the next one. Replacement, rehab, and upgrade fund.
Yeah, so this is Fund 6, and it's an unrestricted fund. So the research, the big changes here are that originally we were recommending the original policy is 50% of the 5 years as the target balance. And I don't know if you guys remember, but during the sewer rate study and the connection fee studies, we wouldn't even be able to reach target balances, I believe, until 2045 on Fund 2, and I don't think ever on Fund 6. So we asked Ken to do some research, and some of the research he found was anywhere from 10% to 20%. He didn't find anything as high as 50%. And then some of the research that I found, and I'm talking about the target fund being 20% minimum of the 5-year the 5 years of capital in the budget. Some of the research that I have done and that Richard has done, I've also found 10%. I did not find any agencies that had 50% that were wastewater treatment plants. One of the other ones that I had found was 25%, Richard had found was 25% at Riverside for their wastewater treatment plant of the next 5 years. I found as low as 3 to 6 months. A couple of the ones I found were based off of depreciation plus 2.5%. So it's kind of all over the board. So the difference in the difference between the current fund policy and now is the 20%. Establish a fund a minimum of 20% of the 5-year total or any amount in any given year at least equal to the amount expected to be funded that year, taking into account other funding sources available. So can I just go ahead and read the full recommendation for the Fund 6 target balance? It's the reserve should be set in a manner consistent with the agency's expected capital funding needs over the 5-year capital planning horizon, and it is recognized these needs and funding amounts will vary. As such, the amount needed in this fund will be subject to board review and discussion with agency management. The appropriate level for the replacement, rehabilitation, and upgrade fund will be set based on the desired level of pay-as-you-go funding in conjunction with other forms of capital funding such as grants and debt. The goal each year would be to establish and fund a minimum of 20% of the 5-year total or an amount in any given year at least equal to the amount expected to be funded that year, taking into account other funding sources available that year. Interest earned in this reserve shall be credited to this reserve. And the prior policy is 50% of 5 years, which in my time we have not achieved.
Okay, so this fund is basically a savings account.
It's our capital fund it's the capital projects that we pay for with unrestricted money, which is the Fund 2 is restricted money, and it's for capacity and connection fees.
Mm-hmm.
Fund 6 is for the other capital projects.
And again, is this to start each year with are we trying to maintain a minimum of 20% throughout the year? Or are we trying to have that 20%, or it says here, the amount in any given year? Because if, any 5-year period, you're going to see different amounts throughout the 5-year period. It might be that this coming year is the big year, and the following 4 or less. And if you get 20% or 1 year's worth, you don't have sufficient funds to fund
Correct.
the coming year. So you're saying, start the year with at least 20% or 1 year's worth or the year that's coming.
Correct.
And again, you're not saying that we're supposed to maintain that throughout the entire year. In other words, draw down to that point. You're saying
The target.
start the year with that balance. I think we should be clear on, that these are balances that we want to start the year at, as opposed to maintaining them throughout the year.
And who again is the person that was
This
the
is
consultant that you were working
Ken
with?
Deeker with Del Rio. He's working on our plan of finance and pro formas that we have actually started reviewing in the finance committee for any potential debt issuances that we need. He's also been helping us with some of our financial policies.
Okay.
He is a municipal advisor. So in the prior fund policy, the target balance for Fund 6 shall be equal to the unexpended revenue balance of transfers to and from General Fund 10. The agency periodically will evaluate and adjust the target balance as appropriate for anticipated future capital needs of the wastewater facilities. The replacement, rehabilitation, and upgrade fund shall have a minimum target balance equal to 50% of the projected 5 years of the planned budget for the capital improvements. It doesn't designate a time of year. It just designates a target.
So if these reserve fund fund modifications, were these reviewed with the finance committee?
Yes, we brought it to the finance committee this month.
You said you were going to bring revised stuff, but the finance committee didn't see the final report and say that we were recommending these exact changes. And as you had said, you were talking about possibly reducing some of them, but
Yes.
this is the first time I'm looking at it.
Okay.
So we were aware that a reserve policy was coming.
I believe we did review it. We had it on as an agenda item on the finance committee in August. We didn't?
No, we talked about
Okay.
as we go into the connection fee study to reestablish reserves, because that would dictate some of the.
So I'd like to make a suggestion. I don't know, maybe it's just Blake and I that are digging in on this, but
You're digging in pretty heavy.
we are. But the reason I am, at least, is we spend a lot of time on these in terms of what the reserve amount is, what's the purpose of each reserve fund when we set these up a few years ago. And it's the staff report, I think would have been a lot more useful to me if it said, here's our current policy, here's what we're recommending it be modified to, here's the reason, as opposed to trying to collect and digest all that information as we're sitting here in the boardroom. I
can do
think
that.
for me, this would be more useful if it came back to the board after it had been through the finance committee to review the details of what we're talking about, rather than kind of just taking this, being kind of glossing over, which is where I'm at right now.
This is just a draft.
What's that?
This is just a draft. This is an idea.
They're seeking approval.
No. It's to approve it's to make this our new reserve policy, is the recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to bring it back to finance committee. We can look at it. I like Dan's idea. We can work on highlighting the differences between the two, not only in theory, percentages, but it would be nice to, based on our current budget, what those actual material impacts would be in terms of how much should our target balance be under our current policy versus the proposed new policy. I think it'd be nice to have the actual dollar signs as well. So what does it mean to go from 50 to 20%? Does it mean that our target is going from, I don't know, we actually have those numbers. And so I think Scott and I can work with you on
And we
that.
can also bring the information.
I don't know. 'Cause
Sorry.
It's hard for me to tell with the information I've got.
I think
This is a proposal, and we need to look at what was before and what the comparison is. That's what you're saying. I like that idea.
in the finance committee meeting, we did talk about wanting to revisit these because we're working with staff and the consultant on a connection fee study, and both the rate studies are in part driven by our reserve policies. How much money do we need to charge to stay in compliance with our reserve policies? And as we jump into the connection fee policy, Krista was saying maybe it's time for us to revisit our reserve policy to do that. And so that's why I'm saying it'd be good to see what the impact of this might be on those as well. I think that'd be important for us to look at. That's kind of the underlying impetus. I think we have enough time in our connection fee process to not try and, approve this document today.
Okay.
We can bring it back to the finance committee meeting and,
I have no problem.
But I think that
Simplify a little bit.
but if we're going to,
That would be helpful.
but if we're going to do a connection fee, which we're working on, it would be good if we're going to change the reserve policy to have that adopted before we do the connection fee study, because it doesn't make sense to do the connection fee study based on a reserve policy and then immediately change the reserve policy that would have changed the results of what we're charging folks for connecting. So that's sort of the nexus that we were looking at there. And so the desire to kind of bring this forward.
Right. And one of the reasons we revisited it to begin with was because during the sewer rate study, we were not going to meet target balances for way beyond probably everybody in this room's time. So that's one of the reasons why we had Ken look at it. So I'll bring it back. I'll bring it to the Finance Committee with additional comparisons and recommendations
And
with actual
Bill's
dollars.
suggestion of, in terms of when it comes back to the board, I think a staff summary,
Yes.
because you've got the detailed policy, which can be a bit overwhelming sometimes to understand, versus a summary that says we've got a reserve policy of X in the current reserve. We're recommending we change it to Y. Here's the reason.
Yeah, I can do
Just
that.
kind of summarize it, and then have a policy that provides the detail for it. And for me, the
Keep
reason
it simple.
I agree. And this is important for me because it's how much money are we going to put in the bank and try to not touch? I mean, some of these reserve funds are money where we're just saying we're going to set it aside, and our goal is to never use that money. Only use it if all hell breaks loose. And I think that's important for us to, as a board, to, do we want a year's worth of savings, do we want 2 years worth of savings, do we want 6 months worth of savings, recognizing that whatever we put into savings is not available to reinvest in the plan. So it's kind of
One of the other things that the policy is doing is also adding an option for a rate stabilization fund for when we get into future debt, potential future debt.
right. Okay. So we'll look forward to seeing this on either our September or October board agenda, depending on how much time the Finance Committee and Crystal need to go back on that. Okay, thanks. So no action there. Next is approval of agency debt management policy.
So we review the agency debt management policy periodically. The only change to the policy is that we are adding the on page 3 under financing criteria, we're adding a description for interfund and interfund loans. It was recommended that we have this in here by actually Stephen Gortler, in case we determine down the road if in interim we want to borrow from Fund 2 to Fund 6, that we need to have this in our policy so we have an option. And we don't have to come back and
So
add
this-
it to the debt policy.
So this is if we want to use connection fee dollars that are restricted to certain uses, and we want to make a loan from that fund to a different fund that the connection fees are not allowed to be used for,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
That we've got a policy in place to loan money from one fund with restricted use to a different use that's not eligible, and that then there's a payback provision that probably includes interest.
Right. And correct. And if we do down the road decide to do that, let's just say for an interim of maybe, I'll just give an example of $10 million, we have to have a written document and there has to be interest paid on that back to the fund.
Okay.
So this is just putting it in our debt management policy as part of the way we do debt.
So again, is that the only change? Was it
Yeah, the rest of
really
the
clear
rest of it
in the-
is just formatting.
Okay, no substantial changes other than incorporating a intra-fund or inter-fund
Yes.
policy.
But each one of those transfers or loans would be brought to the board.
Yes. Because I don't know exactly what the legal term is for an inter-fund loan, but we would have to have a document. We would have to have a document, and it would have to be approved by the board.
That's correct. And the policy that's proposed is consistent with other law on fund accounting and these types of loans.
Okay. Okay. Any further discussion on this? I think the request from debt management policy, is there a effective date? I guess, I mean, today would be
Be on the last
On the last
on the
page.
last page.
last page. Yeah, there we go. Okay. This would update our current debt management policy to basically expand it to allow us to do these interfund loans. Okay.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Okay, item 9, ratified notice of insufficiency of claim to Carl McCormick. Delegate action to deny the claim to the general manager.
So I'm going to ask Andrew to speak to this topic.
This one's a doozy. So TTSA has the, I would say, the honor and privilege of being the first of my clients to receive one of these notices. After I received it from TTSA, I got another 10 from other clients, and I'm aware that there are upwards of 1,000 that have gone out to agencies within the state. I could go on and on about this, but it's really not that relevant to the business that you have before you. Essentially, a Lake County employee, Carrie McCormick, is proposing a class action lawsuit against CalPERS related to disability retirement. As part of that, her attorney has advised her to file claims with every potential affected agency within CalPERS. So TTSA received one earlier than most, but others are getting them as well. The advice that we received from your pool, your liability pool, California Sanitation Risk Management Authority, was to provide a returned claim stating that it was insufficient, didn't have enough information for the board to actually act on it, given that Ms. McCormick was not an employee of TTSA, and then to reject the claim subsequently. Because returning the claim is insufficient would require the board to have a special meeting as of last week, my recommendation to the general manager was go ahead and return the claim as insufficient, given that that is consistent with my analysis of the claim as well as the advice from your liability pool. We've now done that, so we're asking for ratification of that action and also authority to go ahead and reject the claim as a substantive response to it when that time comes, and I believe that's going to be right within a couple days.
What if we didn't do this?
If you didn't do this, you'd be waiving a defense against the claim of the statute of limitations. So instead of having 6 months to file a lawsuit, Ms. McCormick and her attorneys would have whatever the normal time is under state law, probably several years.
And the claim is against CalPERS, and we're just another CalPERS agency. It's confusing to me what exactly our liability is here. Are we protecting?
We're in the same club about that confusion.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I looked at that gigantic list of agencies that are named, and I think everybody at this table
Lake County
is one of them.
Yes.
So kudos to you for bringing this to Andrew's attention. I think it's probably sitting in somebody's inbox at my agency. I think we may have missed those statutes, and I'm partly asking, I'm prepared to ratify this, but I'm partly asking him, in our not prompt action, if our other agencies, have we opened our liability somehow?
They didn't send them all at the same time. They were
Okay.
all dated the same date, but clients have had them rolling in at different times, and some have been postmarked in the last couple of days. I got one client who had received it yesterday.
Okay.
So it's very possible that they just haven't received it yet.
Okay, so unless someone wants to pay this person from Lake County money for some unknown disability, I recommend that we go ahead and go ahead and approve the staff recommendation.
Yeah, ratify the notice of insufficiency.
I take that as a motion from Director Trezin.
Sure.
Second.
Motion by Director Trezin, second by Director Cox.
And if I could just clarify that the motion is the one recommended ratify and then delegate authority to reject the claim.
Motion was to approve the staff recommendation, which I think had all that stuff in it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed? Okay, approval to purchase progressive cavity pumps.
Good morning. All right, just a quick little background here. Back in late 2021, the agency began researching solutions to replace our existing progressive cavity pumps, which were used at the time in the primary sludge pump stations. Parts for the existing pumps had become increasingly expensive, and the means of performing maintenance on them were recognized as exposing staff to increased risk. Staff research identified CPEX as having a proprietary technology that would greatly reduce staff exposure and long-term maintenance costs. A CPEX progressive cavity pump was purchased and installed in early 2022. Since then, staff has experienced no issues with the replacement pump and has purchased an additional unit for the TWAS, or thickened waste activated sludge process. Based on current observations, staff anticipates meeting or exceeding manufacturer's claim of extended service intervals. We currently have two remaining progressive cavity pumps using the old technology for the filter press dewatering system. We have one for the TWAS, an additional TWAS pump, and we also have three remaining progressive cavity pumps for transferring primary sludge and scum from the primary clarifiers. Two of the remaining pumps are due for rebuild, with the remainder due this year. The split stator rotor design of the CPEX smart conveying technology is useful for maintenance because it offers staff the ability to completely rebuild the pump in place rather than by removing the entire unit for the shop. We currently have to lift up the pump and transport it back to the shop, then begin the rebuild there, which is pretty time consuming, takes a long time. This you can do in about a third of the time right now with the clamshell technology that this SCT provides us. We've got some tight spaces that we work on these things in. Staff are bending, twisting, lifting, using hoists and forklifts to move these things around. Presents a lot of risk to staff, and it's very time consuming. So this process, we believe, would eliminate the risk of hoisting the larger equipment overhead and minimize the need to manipulate heavier components in these awkward spaces. Additionally, future rebuilds would be less frequent due to the retensioning device standard on these SCT pumps. Combined, we anticipate these features to save up to 200% and drive asset lifecycle costs down while increasing equipment operational ability. Bids for procurement were not solicited in accordance with the agency bidding policy or purchasing policy. Quotes were provided by DXP Enterprises, they've been identified as the sole source provider for these pumps. We did reach out to CPEX, the manufacturer of the pump, and they identified DXP as the sole manufacturer or sole distributor in the municipal market for Northern California. So the amounts were provided individually in the quote here. I'll get to that in just a moment. So management and staff is currently recommending approval up to $192,000 total for the purchase of two CPEX progressive cavity pumps for the filter press, three CPEX progressive cavity pumps for the sludge and scum system, one CPEX progressive cavity pump for TWAS, which also would include spare parts for the filter press feed pumps and the TWAS pumps.
Great. Is there any questions or comments on this?
No, seems like a good idea.
Yeah, sounds like a great pump. This concept of piggybacking that you mentioned in our purchasing policy, it sounds like we sole source this. I know it's a bunch of extra work, but I don't know if there anybody else went through a competitive bid process and to confirm that these prices are competitive. I don't know if CPEX knew we were seeking these on a sole source thing. Sometimes they can be, that'll jack up the price if they know they're not having to compete for that.
I've got some information on that.
Go right ahead. Go for it.
So previously we bought the initial CPEX from a different distributor. CPEX changed to a new distributor, DXP. Mm-hmm. We reached out to them for a quote for the filter press feed pumps. These are kind of an ongoing issue due to the configuration of where they're located. The initial quote for these came back at roughly double what they are offering here. They packaged a quote for us that was somewhere in the realm of 45 to 50% less than what that initial quote was, provided we packaged all these together. Our research showed that there was no way we were going to beat that price on a one-time kind of a offer or deal. So they're highly motivated to get in the marketplace, highly motivated to get in the plant as the new distributor. So we wanted to take advantage of that.
And so just to piggyback on that, we budgeted 103 to replace one of the existing pumps. That 88,000 that we're seeking with 90 with freight is for two. Okay, so it's almost a buy one get one free on the largest pump of the Lockwood plant. So they really worked with us on pricing.
Thank you. Okay. Good to hear.
Dave or Dave?
Yeah. Good. All good.
Okay. Anyone like to make a motion?
I will.
Moved by Director Schmelzer to approve the purchase of the pumps. Second by Director Cox.
Yep.
By Director Cox. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed? Next
Thank you.
is concept freeze for the 2024 administration parking and landscaping improvements project.
So Aaron's gonna give the presentation, just give a quick background. This has been a project we've been working on for a while. Initially started out in maintenance, and then the project started growing a little bit to include the hardscape, curb and gutter, and asphalt. It then transitioned over into engineering for that reason. So Aaron's here to seek some input so we can lock down the design and then move forward with the finalized design and bidding and construction. So go ahead, Aaron.
President Wilkins, members of the board, the administration parking lot and surrounding landscape have become outdated and are in need of rehabilitation. The 2024 administration parking and landscaping improvements project seeks to rehabilitate this area. Staff is currently working on the project with the intention of construction starting in the summer of 2024. The improvements associated with the project include installation of new curb and gutter along a new alignment, regrading of the front lawn area, installation of new walk paths, update the existing landscape and irrigation. The proposed improvements will benefit the agency by doing the following: increase the number of parking spaces, upgrade the drainage in the front lawn area, improve snow removal efficiency, reduce the number of man hours needed to maintain the front landscaping and pond, enhance the sustainability by installing environmentally friendly landscaping practices, and revitalizing walkways to improve handicap and employee access. On the following page is a concept that we've developed thus far. This departs a little bit from what we understood, in that we wanted the entire area to be all artificial grass. We're seeking to save money by reducing the amount of artificial grass and putting in decomposed granite. So before we go too far down this road, just want to make sure that everybody is kind of on board with this concept before we move forward. And so staff is seeking input from the board to establish project concept freeze. Staff recommends the board review and discuss the proposed design and provide direction as deemed appropriate.
Thanks, Aaron. I have a question. What concept freeze? I've never heard that term before.
Hey, we've kind of coined it around here lately to kind of get projects to a point where we're done changing them around so we can actually move them forward.
Okay.
So we're just looking for a final
direction on that.
Direction that
project scope.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
We've been big on coining new phrases around here.
Question. I like it. I think the DG is probably a good longer term, easier maintenance, less management. And then we're going to have natural grass proposed in those green zones, or is that artificial turf?
One of the input we got from the board was the use of, would like to use artificial grass.
So the proposed grass typical highlight too is that's a artificial. And then all this stuff to the right-hand side that's kind of hatched out with these interesting circles. Our version, they look, all of it's gray.
Okay.
I see up there that you've got green circles in that cross-hatching. No change in that area? Is that really what? I'm not sure what's being proposed or anything on that kind of,
Yeah,
I guess,
so-
the southern side of the.
So this area right here,
Yeah.
the idea is that it's just to remain native. We're not going to touch that area.
Okay.
Here, right now, we have grass in this area. We'd like this area to return to native, with what is currently more native for this area. We'd like to keep the trees. We are proposing on getting rid of this tree right here with the idea that when they push snow, that this tree will prevent that.
You confident you've got enough parking spaces?
We've tried to maximize as much as we can. The board's probably already seen that during some board meetings it can get a little tight up there. So,
How many spaces are we adding?
I believe we're adding approximately 10 parking spaces.
Yeah, 'cause it looks like you could extend parking down the kind of northern circulation aisle further if you wanted to. Or I guess it's actually eastern. Yeah.
Yeah. So and we thought about doing this, but we have trees here, and so we'd like to, if we can, say this.
Okay.
This presents a natural fence. With the O2 pond, or sorry, the O2 tanks behind here, it prevents a nice break.
Okay.
So originally, when we talked about this, we were going to eliminate the water feature in the center there, which, just before the meeting, you explained to me that this was a fire reserve water, or
It is our 2-water reserve pond, so it provides fire water and wash down water. It's our storage tank.
So that actually serves a functional purpose.
Yes.
And there's a pump system to supply the hydrants, or is that just for fire department to come and draft out?
We do have a fire pump that supplies.
So part of the other part of this is that we're removing, there's a total of 4 trees around the pond. And what's happening, the organic material for the trees drop into the pond, get into the 2-water system, and then end up plugging filters. And so by eliminating those trees in this area, it reduces the amount of maintenance work.
So that's basically the existing pond.
Yeah.
Are those rocks in it, or are we chucking some rocks in there that don't currently exist?
They're already there.
What's that?
They're already there.
They are in there. So that's just leaving it alone.
Yeah.
Let that show.
so basically the pond stays as is. The little bridge that used to go across there is gone.
Unfortunately, the bridge was falling apart. It kind of rotted away a little bit. So there wasn't a desire to replace it at the time.
And I know, so it serves a function, having a 2-water reserve, but I'm sure it was originally designed also to be sort of a aesthetic feature. My experience is that that 2-water is pretty heavily chlorinated, and is that the case?
Stinks. It stinks.
Does it? I don't know whether are we still looking for? And I haven't spent much time out there. I mean,
I had my dog there.
There's also the secondary use for that. It is storage. It also gives us contact time with the 2-water with the chlorine,
Okay.
so that when it is used out in the plant by staff, that it's had sufficient contact time with the chlorine, so that it
it's
is.
pretty strong stuff. You're not going to grow koi fish in there or anything like that. My recollection is that you can smell the chlorine sort of coming off that, and that will continue to be the case, as opposed to it being perhaps a koi pond or something like that. That's
Correct.
truly an aesthetic pond.
Correct.
Okay.
What you might be smelling too are these things down here, right? Don't we get fumes coming out of there?
Yeah,
I
the
don't know
steam
what
comes
that's
from the
called.
splitter box that,
Yeah.
that Rochelle's highlighting, as far as the, H2S smells that you get. The chlorine smell off the pond is really when we superchlorinate for a process, occasionally it's processed. Generally, there's not much odor coming off of the pond at all.
Okay, so basically, the recommendation is for the pond to stay, to add some pavement that gets us an additional 10 parking spaces, to rip out most of the lawn, rip out all of the lawn, I guess, and then put in a couple of pockets of artificial turf, or artificial lawn, I guess, which is different than artificial turf, and then scatter some DG in there.
Along with some shrubs.
Yeah.
Just to fill up the, so it's not, fill the negative space, basically.
Yeah.
And I do want to point out, we are planning to take out, there's a waterfall feature here, and we're planning to take that out also.
Okay. Okay, and what staff is looking for is, are we as the board okay with this plan? If we are, that's great. You'll move forward and put it into production to be built next year. If we want to make more suggestions, this would be the time to do it.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm fine with it.
You good, Dave? Dale?
I'd like to see a little bit more artificial turf in the two spots there that are to the left and the right of the entry coming into the building. If we could increase those sizes a little bit. Your
You want to
concern,
tie it into the walkway?
not necessarily tying into the walkway, just a little bit more green. This is a one-shot deal for us. We haven't done anything since this place took shape in 1972 or whatever it was. And I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see a little bit more artificial turf. I think that the concept of scaling back the whole deal like we originally had talked about is a good concept. I'd like to see a little bit more artificial turf to the left and the right of the walkway. Not significantly more, but when you walk in and you have all that white DG, it doesn't give much curb appeal, and that's what we're looking for, is curb appeal here. And if we could spend a little bit more money in artificial turf and a little bit less money in decomposed granite, I think we'd be better served.
Do you guys foresee those artificial turf spots potentially, putting up used by staff for outdoor, I don't know what other outdoor kind of areas there are, that a picnic table and a umbrella or something like that? Do you see that happening, or do you think it'll just, the staff not really want to hang out in the very front area here?
I'd like to make a comment on that. My whole property in Squaw is artificial turf. It heats up big time during the day. So you wouldn't want to be out there.
Unless you have an umbrella.
Yeah, I'm sitting under an umbrella. It gets hot. It's strictly what you're going to be looking at is what's pleasing to the eye. A little bit more artificial turf or a bunch of red or white rock. I would prefer looking at a little bit more green and a little less white rock.
Yeah. So, currently we have a picnic table out back here with an umbrella that the staff utilizes, and the other staff also utilizes the area that is I call it Plant North, I guess, the upper part back there where we're going to keep the actual grass. They sit out there for months because they're shade trees. So that's
Okay.
the area
So you don't envision these two things being a spot that staff would really, and the only reason I'm asking is you'd probably want to put in a paver path to that as opposed to having to walk across the GG and tracking that back and forth if that was going to be a common place where people were going to hang out. That'd be the only minor comment, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
So it sounds like Dale's suggesting to expand the artificial turf near the front entryway, closer to the walkways.
Yes, just give it a little bit more curb
Green,
appeal.
less brown. Okay, I don't have a.
Now, the brown is a misconception. That is going to be white rock as proposed.
Right.
And just a little bit more green, a little bit more curb appeal. I mean, like I say, this is the first time that we've done anything to enhance the curb appeal of this agency. The parking has always been an issue. The pond is, and a lot of times it's a little disgusting. We took a beating when we had the roof replaced on this building. It looked like hell, and it never really came back. And now's an opportunity to make the curb appeal when people come into this agency to file their complaints for user fees or whatever. They have a nice approach. make you feel better.
So Dave, are you okay with the modifications Dale suggested?
Sure.
Okay. Blake? Sure. Yeah, I'm good with it. Anyone else have any other landscaping recommendations before you are required to forever hold your peace and never comment on this again?
I think the main thing is if we can expand the parking a little bit further down on the bottom loop,
Another 5 spaces or so.
yeah, another 5 spaces. 10 spaces is pretty minimal for the size project we got going. Parking has been an issue, a lot of times when I've come in here, I've had to kind of park kind of in the roadway, and
Yeah.
if we could extend the parking as
Yeah,
well.
it sounds like the place to add it would be on the south side, or, well, the bottom is what look at it,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Some of the options we can experiment with or try, we could do a section of DG here that's parkable to cut down costs, or we could just extend this out with asphalt.
Yeah, I mean, you're already doing pavement work here, right?
Yeah.
Now, what about our signage? Is the signage going to be further back out of this immediate area here where the existing sign is? We're just going to have a kind of a remodel on that? What's the proposal there?
So right now we have the existing sign. Zoom out a little bit more. We have the existing sign right out here. That I understand is original to the plant. So we'd like to keep that sign, not necessarily here, but discussions that we've had internally is maybe putting that outside of the plant, because the concept is that by the time you make it to here, you know where you are. So relocating this sign to another location, either somewhere outside the plant.
I mean, outside the gate?
Yes, outside the gate. Another concept that we're working on is a sign approximately right here as you come into the facility that shows you, it's kind of like a map kind of concept where kind of outlines here administration, parking, deliveries, and then
Now, there's a building to the right of the entry there when you come in. That's right about where your finger is. What's that green dot right there above your finger? What is that?
So it's supposed to indicate a tree.
It's a vegetation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Building is here, just behind the tree, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere
In the front.
right around here, approximately.
Okay, so the sign is going to be this side of the building.
Yeah.
What's that building?
Can't talk about
What is it?
Clarence Carver building.
What? Say again?
It's the old Clarence Carver building.
Okay.
Okay. Any further comments? Nice work. You guys have the direction you need?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is approval of resolution 13-2023 commending Jason Parker for dedicated service to the agency.
Okay, so I'll read the resolution for the board. Whereas was employed by the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency on August 16, 2004 until his retirement on August 17, 2023, and whereas the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency Board of Directors would like to recognize Jason J. Parker for his over 19 years of service in which he diligently fulfilled his responsibility as an Assistant Chief Engineer from August 2004 to January 2007, Chief Engineer, Assistant General Manager from January 2007 to November 2011, an Engineering Department Manager from November 2011 through his retirement in August 2023. During this time, Jay Parker served to ensure the economical and efficient operation of the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency and to protect the integrity of the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency Water Reclamation Plant and Truckee River Interceptor, the countless improvement projects, and protect the public health, safety, and welfare. The Board of Directors express its sincere thanks and appreciation for the outstanding service and dedication Jay Parker has provided to the agency, its staff, and the people of the community. Whereas the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency Board of Directors would like to express its sincere thanks and appreciation for the outstanding service and dedication Jay Parker has provided to the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency, its staff, and the people of the community. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Tahoe Truckee Sanitation Agency as follows. The Board of Directors thanks and commends Jay Parker for outstanding service to the agency. Jay Parker has served as an integral part of the Truckee River Interceptor repair and rehabilitation. Jay Parker has been instrumental in maintaining and improving the wastewater treatment plant facilities. Jay Parker has served as an integral part of the development of the agency 25-year master plan. Jay Parker for serving as the agency safety director. Jay Parker has been a dynamic part of the agency, earning not only the respect, devotion, and admiration of the Board of Directors and agency staff, but the respect and recognition throughout the entire agency service area.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay. That's quite a resume there, Parker. The only thing that's missing, didn't you work with what was his name from CH to Smith?
Stan Smith.
Stan Smith.
Yeah.
Didn't you work with him with the BNR?
I did. I mean, he was one of my bosses at CH Mill, and yeah, I worked with him for years, from 94 to 04.
So, because I remember you being here with the BNR discussion and the planning, and
yes,
and I didn't see it written down here. I just thought maybe you forgot about it. That was a pretty integral part of what we got going on here.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, just an observation, Jay, anytime you brought items to us as the board, you were obviously well prepared. You thoroughly researched the item, you had a thorough understanding of it. At least for me, anytime you were bringing something to us, I had automatic confidence that it was the right thing for us as the board to be moving forward on, and had no doubt that it had been thoroughly researched and vetted, and that you had thought through kind of whatever the topic was that we were dealing with. So that has always been much appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So when's the party?
So the resolution, we need a
you need to take
motion?
action on the resolution.
Let Dale do that. Dale, you've worked with Jay his entire career, so.
What do you want me to do here?
Make a motion on the resolution.
Oh, I'd like to do that. So moved.
13-2023. That's a 2023 resolution we're giving today. Okay. Any comments?
Congrats, Jay.
Congrats, Jay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
Should we need a
You've
second
been,
on that?
you've been great.
Yeah,
I will second that. Likewise, Hill.
All right, motion by Dale,
Yep.
second by Blake. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
None opposed? You going to the baseball game Friday?
Now we're heading down to San Francisco.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Get some beach time.
Yeah. For a
It
couple of
is.
years. Right. So it's Friday? Is that it?
Tomorrow morning is it.
Tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Coming in for one last victory lap.
Last victory lap. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sticking around for this last board meeting.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to, you had, Blake mentioned that, was I going to say something at the last board meeting? I did have the option of retiring yesterday. It was very important for me to come in and thank you, directors, everybody, and management and staff. So, thank you. Thank you for my wonderful career here at Richmond.
Best of wishes.
Yeah, thank you.
There's
You're very humble.
Yeah, thanks. If that's, yeah, thank you.
there's different boards and commissions in Truckee that can use qualified people. So,
Well, you know, I remember when Richard retired from the lab, you know, he hung on as a consultant for a couple of years and was very valuable. And I thought maybe there'd be a possibility that you could
Get called back.
Yeah, I'm
become a consultant.
Hasn't been for lack of trying.
On-call consultant for the agency.
Yeah, so I don't know what's next for me. I do know that I want to take a little bit of time here to play and figure things out. But as I said, I'm going to be local. I'm going to stay local, and maybe you'll see me in some form, shape, or way.
cool. Thanks, Jay. So it shows a recess on the
Yeah,
agenda.
so the next agenda item was a recess. We got some refreshments in honor of Jay's favorite item, and thought it'd be nice to give them an opportunity just to chat with them a minute.
Okay. We'll take a 7-minute break.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so why don't we move on, get going to department reports. And who wants to go first? Operations?
I think I'll go first.
Okay.
Good morning, President Wilson, Board of Directors, Michael Peak, Operations Department Manager. For the operations report, for the month of July, all plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. The plant performed well through the month. We continue to monitor and evaluate the sodium hypochlorite project. The WIMS, the Water Information Management Solution System, is still being utilized by staff. Final effluent filter inspection and media replacement. We have 2 pending working orders. For the lab, staff performed the necessary laboratory testing, and they are still in the process of getting results back from the audit that they had. They still have 24 pending corrective actions that they're waiting for determinations on. And that's about it for the operations department report. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Peak? Seeing none, let's move on.
Good morning again, President Wilkins and members of the board. All right, so for the month of June, maintenance staff provided support for the following projects. Digestion improvements, sodium hypochlorite project, state IT master plan implementation, which we do anticipate sometime in September or October bringing to the board. Lucid CMMS project, the landscape project. We also offered assistance with the roof repair project and the warehouse inventory project. A few notable activities during the month as we completed the annual TRI above ground inspection for all the manholes. We modified and adjusted secondary 3 brake arm and replaced the scrapers. We repaired manhole 59. Repaired broken 2 underlines and headworks in EWT. We also began the plumbing modifications for the to connect the Hearst boiler to digesters 29 and 30. We began the one of the TWAS pump upgrades, 1 of 2, the second of which was approved earlier in the board during the board meeting. We replaced and programmed the centrifuge feed pump variable frequency drive, and we had a Siemens Advanced PLC training for various staff across a couple of different departments. And we began a multi-purpose pump station, variable frequency drive upgrade. This is one of our larger drives that we purchased last year, actually, and we finally got one of the last components for that. Work orders for the month are remaining stable. And we have a few pictures here. So as you can see, this is some of the work that was done on the Hirsch boiler tie to the digester plumbing system for 29 and 30. That's one of our in-house welders. Next, that's a picture of some of our staff attending the Siemens PLC training here in the boardroom. And we've got manhole 59 repair. Staff did a great job with the assistance of engineering. And something on the left there, that's one of the big VFDs for the multi-purpose pump station there. You can see that's a very large unit. Had to be handled with a forklift. And to the right there, we've got token boots, pH probe calibrations, and replacements. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul?
I have a question. What is this lagging in that first couple of pictures there, the boiler digester plumbing one? What is the lagging around that? What is it made of?
So let me see what you're looking at. What do you mean by lagging?
Well, the insulation, the white.
So that's a heat loop there. That would be insulation there to retain as much of the heat as possible. There's a heat exchanger over there. So the intent for that was to try to retain as much heat. It just helps for heat loss.
Fiberglass insulation. Fiberglass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Paul, engineering.
President Wilkins, Board of Directors. In the month of July, engineering staff continued to work on the following projects. So projects under construction, we have the 2021 chlorine scrubber improvements project. We're just waiting on a air sampler for that. The 2023 roof repair project, construction has started on the upper roof of AWT. Projects in bid phase is the 2023 digital scanning of the TRI. We're currently going through contract bonds and insurance. Projects in development, the boiler replacement project, the 2022 filter influent condition assessment project, sodium hypochlorite disinfection full scale and study phase, the 2022 TRI Alpine Meadows to Olympic Valley rehabilitation project, and the 2024 front parking landscaping and improvements project study phase. So this is the roof repair project. We have staging of materials. The second picture to the would be my right is the top of the roof. The contractor is getting ready to stage materials and tools. The picture all the way to the far right, far right, you can see the new EPDM roof that's being installed, which is here, and this is the old roof right here. This step up right here is the insulation that you're seeing here. So we're using 2 layers of what they call ISO. It's basically 2 layers of insulation with a layer of Denstec on top. There was a question in the last board meeting, how much of the roof is installed, or how much roofing have we replaced? We have approximately 108,000 square feet of EPDM roofing. 64% of that has been replaced since 2018. 19% of the EPDM roofing was installed between 2007 and 2017. And the remaining 17% was installed beginning 2006 and earlier.
So we've got, are you speculating that we've got a little bit more roofing to do with the next few years, and then we're going to be in good shape for a little while?
I would say we're in good shape now. We've identified all of the problem areas.
Okay.
What is remaining, we have MPPS at the bottom end of the plant next, and we're probably going to do that roofing project next year, which is further. Let's go to the right a little bit more. So next year. We've got a MCC or motor control, this building right here and here.
Battery.
Cool.
Thanks. All right. Any questions for Aaron? Seeing none. Crystal.
So we've already started the interim audit. We had the auditors here recently for the interim audit for fiscal 23. In July, we opened the CalClass account and transferred almost all of our money there, and the first amount of interest we earned for half of July was $44,000. We re-kicked off the connection fee study and are going forward with that for a couple more times in the finance committee. We billed out all of the tax roll billing, delinquent and regular tax roll, plus the 6-month direct bill billing. We worked on the new procurement policy, and I wanted to give a shout out to Kaylee. She did the majority of pulling all of that together, and she did a really good job. Writing policies is not easy. And then the other big thing we've been working on is the pro forma plan of finance with Ken Deeker from Del Rio. We did present the first draft of that to the finance committee. Unfortunately, Blake wasn't able to be at that one, so we will be presenting the next draft of that in the near future to the finance committee. We have 42,927 EDUs purchased, 503 not connected, and then we have 39 we have 39 connections and then 1 inspection. And that's it.
Great. Any questions for Crystal? All right. Seeing none, General Manager's report.
So we continue to work on the connection fee study with HDR. As mentioned, staff continues to implement some of our software programs, such as inventory and reporter management system. Continue to work on progress on the CIP projects. I want to highlight specifically the sodium hypochlorite. We'll be putting out a bid to receive bids for tanks for a permanent solution. So we'll be bringing that for approval at a subsequent board meeting, as well as contracts for pour and slab, and then we can get that system up and finalized. Working on land exchange with Trekitano Airport with Rob over there, and then Aaron's providing assistance, really leading the charge on that with his experience. Had the First River Revitalization Steering Committee that I attended. Not much to report. They created a couple subcommittees, and then it was really just introductions. With the heat, we did a quick ice cream social with staff that seemed to go over well. Had an agency safety luncheon on the 26th. So we have some photos of you hearing that. Continue to work with a consultant on leadership skill building and group team building. And as mentioned, continue to operate the sodium hypochlorite. Also conducted an all-staff meeting just to regroup everybody. And in the photos, you can see 4,067 days without a lost time workplace injury.
Incredible.
So try to really promote that among staff and show our appreciation for working safe and
13 years. You mentioned a consultant, a leadership consultant. Who is that?
His name is Jean Boucher. I don't remember the name of the company.
Boucher Law, with Boucher Law.
His spouse is a labor attorney. His background was he was HR director at Union Sand. So he's kind of delved into the HR side of things of providing consulting training.
Got it. Thanks. Any other questions for Richard? Okay, Seeing none, this is an opportunity for any board member to make any comments relative to the agency or not. Any comments?
I got a comment. Last month, at the beginning of our meeting, we had a room full of unhappy employees. For the most part, unhappy employees.
Were they unhappy or uncertain?
Either one doesn't make any difference, but they were trying to make a point by showing the presence at our board meeting. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a morale problem here. And it's been twofold. It's been a situation where our leadership has been less than desirable, and we corrected that situation by hiring and getting Richard on board as our general manager, along with Michael as our assistant. And we've had a significant turnaround in our morale about how the employees address and look at their management team, which is a real hurdle that we have overcome over the last few years. And the other thing that chimes into the problem, or chimes into the making morale happen, is what we do as a board. And across the board, I think that having the board the way we have it, the diversity in how people think and how people contribute, is we've got a great board, and I think we're doing a good job. But we could do better. And what I did is I had Rochelle sit back and put together a little note about morale and what it can cost the agency. And my focus as a director is on morale and making sure that our people are our greatest assets, and we take care of them. And we take care of them to the point where when they drive through that gate, they want to be here. And I think that we can do, as a board, a better job in helping the management with our morale issues. And like I say, Richard has knocked it out of the park. I've circulated around with different employees, different people, and asked how things are going, and they've all came back and said there's been a miraculous change over what's happened over the last few years, and we're doing the best we can to turn this around. But the figures that are in this little memo that I had prepared are soft. They're light in the monetary cost to this agency of what morale can mean to this agency. So, like I say, we can do a better job.
Yeah. Any other comments still?
That's it.
That's it. Blake, any board comments?
Is there a change in leadership on the board coming up?
Yeah.
Okay. When does that happen?
Be on the agenda for next month.
Okay.
And then goes into effect November.
Okay. The only thing I was going to give you guys a head up on is I got some email kind of giving us advance notice of Water Professionals Appreciation Week, and we at TSD reached out to Truckee Donner PUD. They've got a pretty active outreach PIO that neither our agency nor TTSA has, and seeded with them the idea of trying to get something in the Sierra Sun and Moonshine Inc. about the work that the water collection and treatment provide to our community, and get an article in there. So just giving you a heads up that we may get reached out from trying to get something out there and let the community recognize so much of what we do is out of sight and out of mind, and it'd be nice to on that that week to get something out there, educate the community about what we do.
Okay. I don't have much. I continue to keep the City PD board up to date on what's going on here at TTSA, let them know this land discussion is ongoing. They might be, depending on what we decide to do, they might be interested in looking into some kind of a deal with TTSA, whether it's to buy land or lease land or who knows what, for storage that they don't have, they don't have space for. So we don't have space for some of our things, and we've got stuff scattered around the district, and that kind of remote storage that's up here on the hill, not down in Reno, might be something of interest to the Tahoe City PUD in the future. I think that's it. So with that, we'll move on to closed session.